good evening to another live session in our Tarot On series in the midst of the current global pandemic of Corona-19. So things are changing on an hourly basis at the moment, and it's of interest to us as tarot readers to actually go with the trends, go with what is actually happening and face it in real time as we make progress. So one interesting thing that I wanted to look at today is a technique from Tarosophy, which was my first book, and I want to perhaps demonstrate how in real life it's very different to learning it just from a book, because there's some tricks in the particular method I want to show you of tarot reading that other people who have since borrowed that method or developed it, copied it, utilized it, have sort of missed from the basic intent of the method, because every tarot method should have an intent. It should have a purpose to why you're using it and what you're using it for, and there can be some subtle differences in the way that the method is used. So we're going to do a tarot method, and I'm going to use my Waite-Smith method for it. And hello to some familiar faces, it's nice to see you. Let us know how you're doing in the chat box, because this is strange times indeed. So I'm going to show you that method, but someone had asked about my favourite decks and the decks I use, so I thought I'd take opportunity to share those with you. And again, you can share in the chat box your favourite decks, the first deck that you bought perhaps. So I mentioned, I think in a previous session, my first experience of tarot was with the Tales of the Unexpected Carousel, but also there was a what really prompted me was I had a very progressive high school, and in high school we had a religious studies lesson, and we had a two afternoon lesson, and our religious studies teacher brought us in a New Age teacher. And this New Age person looked at astrology. We went out dowsing, and we actually found a water pipe that ran across the tennis pitch by using some biro pens and coat hangers to make a sort of dowsing rod. And we actually found a line going across the football fields, the sort of rugby fields and the tennis courts at the back of the high school. And we went back to our teacher and said, we think we found a line. He said, well, how are you going to check? And we went to the janitor, and we actually got the he got the maps out, and he showed us the water pipe that ran underneath. And I was absolutely astonished by this. I thought, my gosh, you can actually, this stuff works. So what I then did was went and photocopied, as I mentioned, a Stuart Kaplan book, got my dad to photocopy it, and I cut them out and sellotaped them, put them on cardboard, and then went straight into school the following day and started reading for my sort of 13-14-year-old friends. And that was the Celtic Cross, Majors Only, and Reversed. And as I mentioned, I then got to sit next to Stuart Kaplan when we went and saw US Games for a project that we were talking to them about, the Arcatia project. And I did apologise for him for my first copyright theft of the IJJ deck in his book, and he did forgive me, so I was very grateful to meet him after 40 years in between those two events. And as I mentioned, I had a little old coffee bag that my dad had got, an original recipe, and I thought it was very cool to keep cards in a sort of coffee bag, and I had this fastened to my belt, and I felt very cool at school going around with this. And I still have the deck, and this is it. This was the deck that I actually made when I was about 13, and I still have it. And you can see the sellotape has done very well to actually hold the pictures onto the deck. And because no one actually told me that reading with majors was more difficult, or I should have a full deck, or I shouldn't use reversals, I just started off for 2 years and I read every day with just the majors, with reversals, using the Celtic cross. So it took me quite a while to actually and this has had a lot of shuffling, this deck, and it still makes me 40 years, 40 or more years I've had this this deck. So I think one of the demonstration purposes of this deck is first of all, if you don't know something's difficult and someone doesn't try and teach you that something's difficult, then sometimes you might find an easy way of using it. I don't like teachers who start with, I know a lot of people find this difficult, but don't make anything difficult that might not be. If you don't know, sometimes you can surprise yourself. Someone once came into one of our in-person workshops and said, oh, I've had to buy a deck on my way, I had to do it in a hurry, it's the Thoth deck. And they got out the Thoth deck and they said, is it okay for a beginner? And a few people around the table just sort of took a deep breath in, and I said, yeah, it's fine for a beginner. And they never knew that it was a difficult deck or a complicated deck, and they are still using it to this day, about 10 years later, and they become an expert with the Thoth deck because no one tried to tell them it was difficult. So don't let people tell you something is difficult. So this was the first deck I actually purchased from the Ace of Wands shop in Derby, and I just loved it for its very stylish designs, very avant-garde designs. And this is the Aquarian Tarot by David Palladini. Again, unbeknownst to me, at some future point we would feature David Palladini's art in an article in our magazine, Tarosophist International, free to members of the Tarot Association. And the card that I loved in this particular deck, I've always liked the High Priestess in this deck, which we use for the cover of a magazine with permission. But the card I always identified with was the Page of Wands. It's probably at the bottom, I bet. No, it isn't. So just bemuse yourself while I try and find Page of Wands. But this has a favourite place in my heart. There we go. And I really identify with this sort of wayfarer character, the Page of Wands. And you'll notice there's hardly any expression on the face, so it allows you to project a sort of impression into the deck itself. So that's the Page of Wands. Now, I always wondered where he was going, what adventures he was going on, and for a sort of 16-year-old, when I first bought this deck, when I was old enough to go into an occult shop, that was very, very inspirational for me. So again, good to have inspirations in your deck. Around the same time, I also bought the Waite Smith deck, and a friend of mine at the time, as I was getting into the Golden Dawn, made me this wonderful box. Perfect. They measured it for me, they made it out of cork, and painted it for me, and put the Golden Dawn symbol on the top. And this is still my first deck from, again, about 40 years ago, that I've managed to keep in one piece all along the way. So I'll keep that out because we're going to use that in a minute for our tarot technique. Let me put the box safely down. The other decks I tend to use are the Thoth deck, which I've got here, but I won't necessarily show. My favourite Oracle deck, which is out of print, but if you could get hold of it, it's one of my favourites, is the Philosopher's Stone. I sometimes use this deck as a second reading within a tarot reading, and I lay out 1 or 2 cards from this deck in order to leave a message with the client. because they're wonderful, provocative designs. Nowadays I tend to photograph the card for the client. So there we can see depth. And then this one I love is movement. You can see the sort of lines of stones sort of moving along. So that's movement. Strangely enough, for Facebook today, I selected out this deck to just hold a card up for a picture, and the deck I got was this wonderful deck here, this card here. See how that stone has come out to make a step into the sort of cocoon, but you can still leave it open and keep that boundary open, but also feel protected within your home. So these are beautiful images, and I use that a lot in oracle readings for people. The other deck I've used for a long time is the Psi cards, which is still available, and this is a very good deck because it just literally has very straightforward cards such as work, and my favourite card, this one, excuse me, yes. When people talk about yes/no readings, then this is a very good deck for those. So yes, father, what else have we got? Oh yes, this one's a nice one as well. Now, and so on. This is a beautiful deck for very straightforward readings. I once did this for a pregnancy reading, and I got yes, mother, doctor, advice or something, sage advice. The sage card in the deck relates to doctors, and the pregnant lady did take the advice of the doctor at the last minute with a change to her birth plan, and it turned out that that was the right choice to make. And excuse me, I don't often do health pregnancy readings, but this is so direct that it almost felt cheating to actually charge her for an interpretation of yes, woman, birth, doctor, but then to interpret it as if the birth plan changes, listen to the doctors, don't go with your instinct or gut. So yes, that's the Psi deck, the Psi cards, illustrations by Maggie Kneen or Neen. Okay, got that? I think it's been republished since then. We were going to, I think the owner of the copyright or the license was looking to sell it, and I did contact them, but I never heard back from them. I'm not quite sure what happened with the publication of this deck. More contemporary decks, my favourite deck is, again, unfortunately, Neil Lovell, who designed this deck, passed away, I think, last year, which was a shame because it was way before his time. This is called the Tildwick Tarot, and its conceit is that the design, you can see I've used this a lot because of the state of the corners of the box. The conceit of the deck is that there are no people in it, and it's like walking around a deserted house, and there are just no people in it. So this, for example, is justice. You can see the scales, but also the symmetry of the two flowers and the table, and then the mirror provides symmetry from ourselves to the room. The deck is full of brilliant designs. For example, this one. But what you have to do when you read with this deck is place yourself as if you are walking around the house. Because there are no people in the way, you automatically assume a sort of first-person perspective, and this is a very great deck for, we'll look at this one here. There is a person in that one, but it's very rare to see a person. It's a very good deck for self-readings, because even though it looks very austere, when you start reading with it and put yourself in the position, you see the watering can down here and the plants and the sea and so on. It really takes on a life of its own, because you have to put your life into it. And I've used this for reading for other people as well, and it's come up with very significant and meaningful readings. So that's published by Neil Lovell, who went under the name Malpertuis Publishing, and I believe his website is still operational and you can still buy his deck. I think his family or survivors do run the site. So it's nice to see some of the fans of the Tildwick deck as well. So those are the main decks I use. Obviously I'm lucky enough, privileged enough to have access to a lot of decks, but those are the main ones I use. There are some others that I tend to use if I'm feeling a bit experimental, like the Fountain deck I like using, and just a few other types of deck. The Jolanda Tarot I've been using recently, just because it's so wacky, and I debordered it, and it took me about 3 years on and off debordering it, and yeah, so I sometimes use that as well. And of course, more often than not nowadays, the Lenormand deck. This is our version of the original Lenormand, which we still have a few copies of this available at originallenormand.com, and that's the actual cover of the box in the British Museum that we've put onto the tin, and then the original Lenormand deck itself inside that. So I tend to use that. Okay, so someone had asked me about framing questions for Lenormand, and someone else had asked me about why Lenormand cards are smaller. We might get onto that tomorrow, or one of the many other days in this ongoing sequence. What was I going to do? Oh yes, so we're going to look at this particular tarot method, which I hope will blow your minds if you've not come across it before. It's a very simple method, and I'm going to show you my secret trick with it as well. So it was originally called the Finding Hope method, Finding Hope. And the reason that it was developed is because in Neo-Ericksonian hypnotherapy, which I practice, and NLP, there's a sort of basic concept of incorporate and utilize. So there's no such thing as no communication. There's only our ability to incorporate it and then utilize it within our own communication. So if someone, the classic example might be if someone said, and hello Jason Lewis, if someone said to me, you can't hypnotize me, and folded their arms and said, you can't hypnotize me, I'm very strong-willed, then I would say something along the lines of, no I can't, because if I could, you'd unfold your arms. And then I'd hold them in a very strange continual stare, which they wouldn't be used to, keeping eye contact, because then they've got a choice. They can either keep their arms folded, in which case they're now doing it to spite me, or they can unfold their arms, in which case they're following my instructions. And it's a good demonstration of incorporating the communication and then utilizing it by reframing the idea that, yes, you're totally strong-willed. I accept that. So I can't possibly influence you. And you're incorporating it within your communication. You're not trying to argue against it. A practical example of that, a guy came to see me for giving up smoking, and he said, "Oh, my wife sent me, and I really didn't want to come, and I don't think hypnosis would work because, I'm really strong-willed. But I do need to give up smoking because of a cancer diagnosis that he'd had." And we spent the whole session with me apologising to him that it's unfortunate we'll have to spend our hour talking, and you'll have to tell your wife that it didn't work because you're too strong-willed, and I couldn't possibly be able to use any tricks or techniques. And I can even tell you some of those tricks and techniques that I try and use on people who are not very strong-willed in order to get them hypnotized. But, you're obviously too strong-willed to fall for them, and so on. So in effect, I spent the entire hour consolidating, incorporating, and then utilizing his strength of will. And then the next time I saw him with his wife walking down the road, he looked a bit embarrassed and stuff, and so did I. And he said, "Well, it's a bit unfortunate it didn't all work out and stuff, and no hard feelings. You can keep the money and stuff." But then he said, "But mind you, I did give up smoking anyway. Just coincidentally. But of course, it was because, in part, we'd actually incorporated his own strong will and then amplified it and utilized it." So this particular method does something very similar. I always wondered, when people come to a reading, sometimes they are really out of options. They really do not know what to do. They don't even know what to feel. They really feel sometimes that there is no hope or no passion left, or no chance, or no time, or no whatever it might be. So instead of trying to convince them that there is, what we do is we utilize and incorporate it. And I hope this longer explanation in person sort of makes a bit more sense if you've read the method in one of the books. So what I do with someone like that, and you can do this for any emotion, any state, which is why it's quite powerful, but it's very simple. So here are the instructions. You tell the client repeatedly that there is a card in the deck that means hope. So you say, "Well, I understand that you feel hopeless, or passionless, or unable to survive, or anything else. But luckily enough," and you say, "luckily enough, there's a card in the deck for that. In the case of hope, it's the star card. So I'll find the star card, and we'll have a look at that, because that's to do with hope, and that's in the deck, and it's in the deck. I'll just find it in a second. There we go. So I raise my tonality and I anchor. Oh, I was looking for it, and there it is. It's in the deck. It's hope, and this card symbolizes hope, and I tell the person that this is the card that symbolizes hope, or this is the card that symbolizes partnership, or this is the card that symbolizes strength. This is the card that symbolizes clarity of thought, revision, the ability to remember facts, and so on. Whatever they feel that they've actually lost or could not possibly gain, I find the card that represents that. So that's the first trick, that you always find the card that represents it. And then what I tell the person is to shuffle the deck, and whilst they're doing it, to actually generate the state of hopelessness. I ask them to think of a time when they felt most hopeless. And they might say, "Oh, that's now," or "that was last week, I woke up, I was just feeling hopeless." And by getting them to talk about it, you're incorporating it, and incorporating it in the shuffle as well. And you might even see them shuffling it differently, like in a hopeless way. Instead of trying to cheer them up or change their state, in NLP we never deny someone their state. And hello to Charlotte, who's just joined us. We never get them to change their state. We incorporate and utilize it. Never deny someone their own state. It's too much work. So we help them become more hopeless, and we say, yeah, I know times like that can feel really hopeless, and I understand that. I get that. That's quite understandable. Was there anything else in that time that made you feel hopeless? And they shuffle the deck whilst you amplify the hopelessness, and then you say, right, let's now go and find hope in the deck. And here's the trick, here's the sneaky trick that is to do with incorporation and utilization. I then go and look and I go, okay, we'll find the star card, as we saw, that's the card of hope. Oh, hang on, I must have missed it. Just start again, hang on, sorry. And while I'm doing that, I then take on the hopelessness. Yeah, we validate their feeling, and now we actually incorporate it and start to utilize it. Incorporate and utilize are the key words. So I go, no, it's okay. I will find it. I'm showing hope. No, it's okay. It's in here. We saw it. Oh God, I must have missed it. Oh, it's probably at the bottom. Hang on a second. No. Oh, hang on a second. And I start to actually incorporate the state they've given me by the card. And then eventually, when I've done that enough and I can see them thinking, what's happening here? This is hopeless, this is useless, this is not a very good tarot reading, this is a hopeless reading. When we get to that state, I then go, got it, here it is, there's the star. And now I don't say hope, I say there's the star, because I've now incorporated that symbol as hope. So I don't need to say hope anymore, because that's conscious. We now go unconscious and we start talking about the star card. We never mention hope again from that point on. But I've done it by actually going, I've been hopeless in looking for it, and now I've found it. We've now demonstrated to their unconscious a state change, and if you can show one exception to the rule, the unconscious cannot hold it as a generalization. If you show one exception to a rule, the unconscious cannot hold it as a generalization at all. The unconscious works by suppressing, repressing, depressing, projecting, all sorts of other mechanisms to allow itself to hold something whole, because the unconscious works as a network, as a holistic thing. It doesn't work in a tension where each thing is discrete and chained together. So we give them an example of a hope situation that we've now found hope in, and then what I do is I take out the card with the two cards either side of it. Now if that card, say for example the star card, is at the bottom, I take that card next to it and then the card on top, as if it's in a big loop, if that makes sense. So I then take out the two cards either side of it, and I then read those two cards. Let me get this right, there we go. Let me stick the star behind them, there we go, the star above them, get that right, there we go. And now I read those two cards as their way of finding the star. So I don't mention hope, I say, so to find the star, obviously you need to really cut down your ideas and really take a logical attack at your ideas, because you feel as if you're carrying lots of different values, probably of other people, and you no longer can see where you're going, so you can't see the star that's above you. I'm incorporating the position of the star there. So you can't see the star that's right ahead of you. And then I might go, so when you lay down all of those ideas, the star's completely naked, and I'll hide that card behind that one, or put it on the table like that, to again utilize and incorporate the actual cards with the message that I'm giving. If I want to focus on something and want them to focus, I'll say, so you really need to pay attention to the detail in your situation. But while I'm doing that, I'm also pointing to a detail on the card, so their state has to move into paying attention to detail on the card, even if I don't mention it, whilst I'm saying to them, you need to pay attention to your situation and really get to the point of it. What's the real point? And I'm pointing, so pointing to the point, and I might say you need to get to the point of what it is that you really want. Just one thing. See, I've done one thing, and that's making that sword as well. One thing. So everything is being a layered communication to find the star. And then I might leave the star on the table or give it to them and say, so, sometimes we can't find the star, sometimes we can. And I hope that, and then I'll give them the card, they'll hold it, and I'll say, I really hope you can hold on to some of these ideas, because they're holding the card now, so their unconscious is now saying, translating that like a dream, this is the symbol of hope. I've been told that, I'm holding hope, even if it was a hopeless situation, and now I know the way to get to it. Makes sense? Obviously that's a cut down version of a reading, but that's basically the bare bones of it. So if anyone is hopeless, that's it. As Marcy is saying, it is a sort of, it's not so much a reversal, it is just incorporating and then utilizing their state within the reading itself, and then layering that state, not being frightened. A lot of people, particularly when they begin to read tarot or do counseling and so on, they really try and change the state. This is the point. You need to change the state that the person is in. If they come in depressed or sad, you want to make them happy and positive. But in NLP, we're taught to go there first. We actually go into their state, utilize it, incorporate it, and then work upwards from it, and then we go into the right state first, and then we take them to it. And we do that using symbology, metaphor, unconscious imagery, and of course this is exactly what the tarot is. I think we can all sort of agree on that. We can all agree on seeing that. I mean, it's sort of obvious really when you look at it. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So I thought I'd just like to share that quick tarot method with you, but more importantly, use this as an example of where actual one-to-one teaching or course teaching, video teaching is a lot better, because it's very difficult in a book to put some of those nuances in, and then someone reads the book, they take the method, they use the method, they then teach the method, but they're not actually they're just teaching the methodology and not the intent, purpose and reasoning that actually makes the method work. Some methods do carry that with them. This is a method that sort of does, but it's a lot more powerful if you understand why it was developed and the context in which it's being held. Okay, does that make sense? Is that a useful one? And you can modify it in lots of different ways. Again, in terms of advertising and sales pitch, if you're interested in ideas like this, courses in the Tarot Association are full of them, totally unique. You won't find them anywhere else unless they've been borrowed, they've been honoured by other people or curated. So it's many techniques in one, and I always encourage students as well to take the idea and then play with it and work. Don't copy the method, copy the idea and develop that into lots of different ways. The whole idea of incorporate and utilize generates 1,000 approaches and methods and tools, often in real time, that you'll never use again, but allow you to work with the client directly and powerfully through the tarot. Yeah, as Lily is saying, it's like learning knowledge then applying it. A lot of tarot teaching fails because it teaches methods but not skills. There is a big difference between a skill and a method, and what we want to do is quite often we teach skills without even using a tarot deck, or point out someone's skill at being able to interpret pictures or listen to music in another context. And when they know the skill and have practiced it, and we know that they've got the skill inside the approach, Then we show them the method, and then suddenly it's, now I see. And the method becomes easy because you're waiting to want to know how to apply the skill. Whereas if you try and teach someone a method, then the problem is sometimes people don't have the skills, not because they're stupid or anything, just because they haven't learnt or haven't realised you need a particular approach or skill to that method. And then the method fails and they think that they're failing at the method or the method's no good. That's because they've not been taught the skill to enact the method. Make sense? So a lot of our teaching tricks people by utilising skill teaching and showing people that they have certain skills even before they see the tarot deck, and then we show them the tarot deck, and then they've got the methodology that skill suddenly applies to, and they lock in position. And that's the tarosophy approach to teaching tarot in a nutshell. Okay, so we're just going to read our bedtime story. We have about 5-10 minutes to finish with. So from Moonchild, my drink of choice today is a tiny, the smallest can of Coke I've ever seen. But it's all that's left in our supermarket today. There was just nothing left. No toilet rolls, no bread. There was no bread in our supermarket today at all. But there were 3 tiny cans of Coke. So that's today's treat. Okay, are we ready for a bedtime story? We are reading the story of Lola Daydream. And there was a very important message from yesterday's piece of the story, which was that she couldn't be a good wife to the fairy prince, to her spirit, to her spiritual connection, because she often would fill her dreams with dreams of other people. And that's a very important thing for beginners, not to worry about other people and what other people might think, or they compare themselves to other people. Every beginner should find their own voice, their own way of doing things, their own method and approach and speed right from the beginning, rather than try and train people to be cookie cutter type versions. Then it's really more interesting as a teacher as well to find what they have and then develop that. So don't worry about other people. You've got enough to worry about with yourself usually. So I'll tell you about Conks on Pax tomorrow. It's a sort of magical Greek phrase, but for now let's just read onwards into the wake world. So where had we got to? The fairy prince had galloped across a beautiful green sunset, Malkuth, the bottom of the tree of life, and we're going to slowly go up the tree of life, and I'll find a diagram for us for another day, and we're going to move onwards from that. So here we go. By and by we came to a beautiful green place with the strangest house you ever saw. Round the big meadow there lay a wonderful snake with steel grey plumes, and he had his tail in his mouth and kept on eating and eating it because there was nothing else for him to eat. And my fairy prince said that he would go on like that till there was nothing left at all. Then I said it would get smaller and smaller and crush the meadow and the palace, and I think perhaps I began to cry. But my fairy prince said, "Don't be such a silly." And I wasn't old enough to understand all that it meant, but one day I should, and all one had to do was to be as glad as glad. So he kissed me, and we got off the horse, and he took me to the door of the house, and we went in. So we're entering the houses, the palaces, and it is the Sephiroth, or the emanations, on the diagram called the Tree of Life, which is the diagram of how the universe works, illustrated through correspondence to the tarot, astrology, alchemy, and every other system, numerology and colour, as we'll see in this. So where are we? And we went in. It was frightfully dark in the passage, and I felt tired, so that I couldn't move. So I promised to myself to love him always, and he kissed me. It was dreadfully, dreadfully dark though, and he said, "Not to be afraid, silly. And it's getting lighter. Now keep straight forward, darling." And then he kissed me again and said, "Welcome to my palace." I will tell you all about how it was built, because it is the most beautiful palace that ever was. On the sunset side were all of the baths, and the bedrooms were in front of us as we were. The baths were all of pale olive coloured marble, and the bedrooms had lemon coloured everything. Then there were the kitchens on the sunrise side, and they were russet like dead leaves are in autumn in one's dreams. The place we had come through was perfectly black everything, and only used for officers and such things. There were the most horrid things everywhere about, black beetles and cockroaches and goodness knows what. But they can't hurt when the fairy prince is there. I think a little girl would be eaten though if she went in there alone. Then he said, "Come on, this is only the servants' hall. Nearly everybody stays there all their lives." And I said, "Kiss me." So he said, "Every step you take is only possible when you say that." So hence they pass through the servants' quarters of the palace. It's a description of Malkuth, the dark side of that, the colour symbolism of Malkuth at the bottom of the tree is divided into a quadrant, four quarters with different colours, with black at the bottom, and the insects there, the shelled insects, represent what are called the Qliphoth. The Qliphoth are the noise of the engine. They are the friction, the sparks from the friction. They are the broken bits of the vessels as the light pours through them. They are the necessary waste that we have whenever we do anything in creation. So the Qliphoth are often seen as being evil, particularly in Western esotericism, because we have this dual way of looking at things, good and evil, good and bad, white and black, up and down. But originally the Qliphoth were seen as a necessary part of the model, because whenever you have creation, you have something that is not part of that, or is a waste of that, or is a shattering of that. And that is seen as just part of creation as much as everything else. So there we see it in the insects in the dark at the bottom of the tree. And Crowley's comment that most people spend all of their lives there is true, that most people do spend their life in our everyday reality without thinking what is beyond this, what is more than this, is this all there is? And is this all there is? That question is the kiss that takes you a closer step to your angel, out of Malkuth and up the tree of life itself. It's the basic question. There must be more than this, and that's the kiss that takes you a little bit further in the story. Okay, so I hope that was a nice part of our bedtime story, and we will continue our bedtime story every day as we go onwards into our 2020 adventure of the pandemic legacy. Okay, so thank you for your time. Practice the method if you like, the Finding Hope method, but you can do it with Finding Anything method, and I look forward to your comments in the Facebook group. And until tomorrow, any questions that you might have, I'll pass them on to myself tomorrow. So thanks a lot for your time and attention. The book is Terosophy, which is self-published, available on Kindle and Amazon if you want. There's 50 exercises in that book, graduated by beginner, intermediate and advanced, covering methods like Finding Hope as well. Okay, thanks a lot for your time, and stay well, stay healthy. necessary, stay indoors. Okay, bye for now.